From the moment the papers arrived, Sarah knew her fight with the HOA was about to get ugly. They claimed she'd violated community rules, but this was her land, and she was ready to wage war to protect it. Sarah stared down at the certified letter, her hands trembling with rage. The Sunnyside Homeowners Association was formally accusing her of violating their covenants by building an unauthorized fence on her property. "This has to be some kind of sick joke," she muttered, scanning the carefully worded legal threats. They were giving her 30 days to remove the fence or face fines and potential litigation. But Sarah had built that fence herself last summer, using her own money and materials. It was on her land she had legally owned for over a decade. The nerve of these HOA bullies trying to tell her what she could and couldn't do on her own property. "Not a chance in hell," she growled, crumpling the papers in her fist. She stormed to the kitchen, where her husband Matt was making breakfast. "The HOA is trying to make me take down my fence," she blurted, slamming the letter on the counter. "Can you believe this?" Matt's brow furrowed as he read through the document. "This is ridiculous. The fence is on our land, not theirs. What gives them the right to demand we remove it?" "That's what I'm saying," Sarah exclaimed. "They're acting like they own this whole neighborhood. But last I checked, I pay my mortgage and taxes. This is my property, not theirs." "So what are you going to do?" Matt asked. Sarah's eyes narrowed with determination. "I'm not backing down. I'm going to fight these jerks tooth and nail. No way am I letting them push me around on my own land." Matt nodded slowly. "All right. If that's what you want to do, I've got your back. But you know the HOA can be ruthless. They've sued homeowners before over trivial stuff like this." "Then let them sue," Sarah said defiantly. "I've got nothing to hide. I'm in the right here, and I'm not going to let some power-hungry bureaucrats intimidate me." She paused, a mischievous glint in her eye. "In fact, I think it's time we give them a little taste of their own medicine." Matt eyed her warily. "What are you planning?" "Oh, you'll see," Sarah replied with a sly grin. "This is war, Matt, and I intend to win." Sarah spent the next few days meticulously researching the HOA's covenants and her own property records. She was determined to uncover any loopholes or inconsistencies that could work in her favor. Meanwhile, Matt made discreet inquiries among their neighbors. He was surprised to learn that several other homeowners had also been on the receiving end of the HOA's aggressive tactics over the years. "It's like they're power tripping or something," one neighbor confided. "They think they can just do whatever they want, even if it's totally unreasonable." Another neighbor chimed in. "Yeah, and God forbid you ever try to challenge them. They'll slam you with fines and lawsuits faster than you can blink." Matt relayed the information to Sarah, who nodded grimly. "Exactly what I suspected. These people are bullies, plain and simple. But I'm not about to let them push me around." Over the next week, Sarah compiled a dossier of evidence. She had aerial photos clearly showing the fence's location on her property, as well as copies of the original land survey and her warranty deed. "There's no way they can argue this," she told Matt, flipping through the documents. "The boundaries are clearly defined, and the fence is squarely within my lot lines." Matt whistled appreciatively. "Wow, you really went all out. I'm impressed." Sarah smiled confidently. "When you're up against an enemy as relentless as the HOA, you can't afford to leave any stone unturned. I'm going to make them regret the day they decided to pick a fight with me." The next morning, Sarah marched down to the HOA office, her thick folder of evidence in hand. The manager, a stern-faced woman named Mrs. Blackwell, greeted her with a disapproving frown. "Mrs. Carson, I assume you're here about the fence violation notice we sent you." "That's right," Sarah said evenly. "And I'm here to tell you that I have no intention of removing that fence. It's on my property, and you have no legal grounds to demand its removal." Mrs. Blackwell's lips thinned into a tight line. "I assure you, Mrs. Carson, We've reviewed the covenants carefully. That fence is in direct violation, and you will be fined if you refuse to take it down. Sarah opened her folder and slid the documents across the desk. I think you'll find that's not the case. As you can see, the fence is well within the boundaries of my land. Your covenants don't apply here. Mrs. Blackwell's eyes narrowed as she skimmed the paperwork. Her expression slowly morphed from one of smug confidence to begrudging acknowledgement. This appears to be in order, she muttered, her voice laced with frustration. But I can assure you, Mrs. Carson, this isn't over. Oh, I'm counting on it, Sarah replied coolly, because I'm just getting started. Over the next few weeks, Sarah continued her campaign against the HOA. She attended every monthly meeting, armed with a detailed presentation on the history of her property and the legality of the fence. Despite Mrs. Blackwell's increasingly hostile attempts to shut her down, Sarah refused to back down. She patiently explained the facts, citing relevant sections of the covenants and local zoning laws. The simple truth is, this fence is on my land, not the HOA's, she stated firmly. I have every right to install it, and I won't be bullied into removing it. The other homeowners listened with rapt attention, many of them nodding in agreement. Sarah could see the seeds of discontent starting to take root among the community. Mrs. Blackwell, on the other hand, grew more flustered with each passing meeting. This is unacceptable, she would fume. The covenants are clear, and you're in violation. I don't care what your paperwork says, you will remove that fence or we'll take you to court. But Sarah refused to be intimidated. Go ahead and sue me, Mrs. Blackwell. I look forward to seeing you in front of a judge, because I can guarantee you, I'll win. The standoff continued for weeks, with the HOA board growing increasingly frustrated by Sarah's unwavering resolve. Meanwhile, more and more of the neighbors began to openly sympathize with her. About time someone stood up to those HOA bullies, one elderly resident remarked during a chance encounter at the community mailboxes. It's high time someone put them in their place. Sarah smiled gratefully. Well, if no one else is going to do it, I guess I'll have to take one for the team. As she headed back home, she couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. She was fighting for more than just her own property rights. She was standing up for the entire community against the HOA's heavy-handed tactics. That evening, as she and Matt prepared dinner, she couldn't resist sharing her latest triumph. You should have seen Mrs. Blackwell's face today, she said with a chuckle. I think I really got under her skin. Matt grinned. I'd bet. She's probably used to homeowners just rolling over and doing whatever she says. Well, not this time, Sarah declared. I'm done playing by their rules. If they want a war, then that's exactly what they're going to get. Matt placed a hand on her shoulder, his expression serious. Just be careful, okay? These HOA people can get pretty ruthless when they feel threatened. Sarah nodded determinedly. I know. But I'm not backing down, no matter what they throw at me. This is my land, and I'm going to fight for it tooth and nail. As she gazed out the kitchen window, a flicker of movement caught her eye. Narrowing her gaze, she spotted a familiar black SUV parked on the street. Mrs. Blackwell's personal vehicle. Looks like the battle's about to heat up, she murmured, a steely glint in her eye. Time to take the gloves off. The next morning, Sarah woke up early and headed out to inspect her property. As she approached the fence, she noticed something unusual. A small, inconspicuous flag had been planted near the boundary line. Her eyes narrowed as she bent down to examine it. The logo on the flag clearly identified it as belonging to the Sunnyside HOA. So that's how they want to play it, she murmured, straightening up. Quickly, she retrieved a shovel from the garage and set to work, carefully digging up the flag and examining it. As she suspected, there was a small electronic device embedded in the base, a GPS tracker. Sneaky bastards, she growled, crushing the device under her heel. She knew the HOA was trying to gather evidence to support their claims, but this was crossing a line. Determined to stay one step ahead, Sarah swiftly set to work, carefully examining every inch of her property for any other hidden surveillance devices. To her dismay, she found 2 more flags, each with a similar tracker. "Oh, it's on," she muttered, a plan already forming in her mind. Quickly, she gathered the trackers and retreated back into the house, formulating her next move. That evening, as Matt returned home from work, Sarah greeted him with a mischievous grin. "I've got a surprise for you," she announced, leading him to the kitchen counter where the 3 crushed trackers lay. Matt's eyebrows shot up. "What the? Are those what I think they are?" "Yep," Sarah confirmed. "The HOA has been spying on us. They planted these little GPS trackers on our property, probably trying to gather evidence against me." Matt's expression darkened. "Those sneaky, underhanded bastards. I can't believe they'd stoop that low." "Well, 2 can play at that game," Sarah said, her eyes gleaming. "I've got a plan to turn the tables on them." Over the next few days, Sarah worked tirelessly, meticulously crafting her counterattack. She purchased a set of high-tech surveillance equipment, including hidden cameras and audio recorders. Carefully, she placed them around the perimeter of her property, ensuring they were well hidden from prying eyes. "If they want to play spy games, then I'll give them a taste of their own medicine," she told Matt, who watched with a mixture of admiration and concern. The opportunity to put her plan into action came a week later, when Sarah spotted Mrs. Blackwell's SUV parked on the street once again. Quickly, she fired up the surveillance system and began recording. To her delight, the HOA manager soon emerged from the vehicle, accompanied by 2 men Sarah didn't recognize. They proceeded to comb the area, occasionally pausing to examine the ground and take notes. "Aha, there they are," Sarah murmured, a triumphant grin spreading across her face. "Let's see how they like being on the other side of the camera." As the trio continued their surreptitious investigation, Sarah carefully documented their every move, capturing both audio and video evidence. When they finally retreated back to the SUV and drove away, she knew she had the ammunition she needed to strike back. "Time to show these HOA bullies who they're dealing with," she declared, her expression hardening with determination. The next day, Sarah arrived at the Sunnyside HOA offices armed with her evidence, her eyes blazing with righteous fury. She marched straight up to Mrs. Blackwell's desk, slamming down a thick folder of documents. "I've got a few things I'd like to discuss with you," she declared, her voice dripping with barely contained anger. Mrs. Blackwell looked up, her expression a mix of surprise and irritation. "Mrs. Carson, to what do I owe this pleasure?" "Let's cut the crap, shall we?" Sarah snapped. "I know all about your little spying operation on my property, and I've got the proof right here." She opened the folder, revealing a stack of printouts and video recordings. "These are surveillance footage and audio recordings of you and your goons trespassing on my land and illegally planting GPS trackers. Care to explain yourself?" Mrs. Blackwell's face paled as she flipped through the evidence, her lips thinning into a tight line. I don't know what you're talking about. The HOA has every right to monitor." "Save it," Sarah interrupted, her eyes narrowing. "You know damn well you're in the wrong here. And if you think I'm just going to roll over and let you continue your little witch hunt, you've got another thing coming." She leaned forward, her expression hardening. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave me and my property alone once and for all. No more fines, no more threats, no more illegal surveillance. If I so much as catch a whiff of your people on my land again, I'll take this straight to the authorities." Mrs. Blackwell opened her mouth to protest, but Sarah cut her off. "And before you get any bright ideas about suing me, let me remind you that I've got plenty of evidence to support a countersuit for harassment, trespassing, and violation of privacy. So I'd strongly advise you to think very carefully about your next move." She paused, letting her words sink in. "Do we have an understanding?" For a long moment, Mrs. Blackwell sat in stunned silence, her face flushed with a mixture of anger and humiliation. Finally, she let out a defeated sigh. "Fine," she muttered through gritted teeth. "You win, Mrs. Carson. We'll leave you alone." "Good," Sarah said, a triumphant smile spreading across her face. "I'm glad we could come to an understanding." With that, she turned on her heel and strode out of the office, her head held high. As she walked back to her car, she couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication. "Told you I'd win this war," she murmured to herself, a glint of pride in her eyes. Later that evening, as she and Matt shared a celebratory dinner, she couldn't resist gloating. "Can you believe the nerve of those HOA creeps?" she exclaimed. "Spying on my property and thinking they could just get away with it." Matt chuckled. "I have to hand it to you, honey. You really showed them who's boss." Sarah nodded, a satisfied smile on her face. "Damn right. Nobody messes with me on my own turf. Not the HOA, and not anyone else." She raised her glass, her eyes shining with triumph. "Here's to winning the battle." But the war is far from over. In the weeks that followed, Sarah's victory over the HOA sent shockwaves through the Sunnyside community. Word of her defiant stand spread quickly, and soon she found herself becoming a local hero among her fellow homeowners. "It's about time someone put those power-hungry HOA jerks in their place," one neighbor remarked. "Sarah Carson's my new hero." Others chimed in with their own horror stories of the HOA's heavy-handed tactics, each one more infuriating than the last. It became clear that Sarah's battle was not just about her own property rights, but about standing up for the entire community against the tyranny of the Homeowners Association. Even so, Sarah knew the war was far from over. Mrs. Blackwell and the HOA board were not the type to simply accept defeat and slink away. She knew they would be plotting their revenge, looking for any opportunity to strike back. True to her suspicions, the retaliation came a few weeks later, when Sarah received a summons to appear before the HOA's disciplinary committee. "What is the meaning of this?" she demanded, slamming the document on the kitchen table. Matt's brow furrowed as he scanned the letter. "It looks like they're accusing you of violating some obscure rule at the height of your hedges. Total nonsense." Sarah let out a frustrated growl. "I knew they'd try something like this. Those sneaky bastards are really pulling out all the stops, aren't they?" "Don't worry, we'll fight this, just like we did with the fence," Matt assured her. "We've got the evidence on our side. There's no way they can win this." But as Sarah sat before the disciplinary committee, she quickly realized that the HOA had no intention of playing fair. Mrs. Blackwell and her allies bombarded her with a barrage of petty accusations, citing every minor infraction they could find in the community covenants. "Your hedges are in violation of our height regulations," Mrs. Blackwell declared, her lips curled in a smug smile. "And we've received multiple complaints about the condition of your lawn. You're clearly neglecting your property and devaluing the neighborhood." Sarah bristled, her hands clenching into fists. "That's complete and utter nonsense, and you know it. My hedges are well within the allowed height, and my lawn is perfectly maintained." "Be that as it may," Mrs. Blackwell interjected, "the fact remains that you violated our covenants. And the penalty for such infractions is a hefty fine, as well as the possibility of a lion being placed on your property." Sarah's eyes widened in disbelief. "You can't be serious. This is nothing but a blatant attempt to harass me and undermine my previous victory." Mrs. Blackwell's expression hardened. "I can assure you, Mrs. Carson, we are deadly serious. Either you comply with our demands or face the consequences." Sarah glared at the committee members, her mind racing. She knew this was a calculated move to wear her down, to force her into submission. But she also knew that she couldn't back down, not after everything she'd been through. "Fine," she said through gritted teeth. "I'll play your little game. But mark my words, this isn't over." As she stormed out of the meeting, her resolve only grew stronger. She was determined to find a way to beat the HOA at their own game, no matter what it took. They want a war? She muttered under her breath. Then that's exactly what they're going to get. In the days that followed, Sarah threw herself into researching every possible legal avenue to fight back against the HOA's harassment. She pored over community covenants, local zoning laws, and even consulted with a real estate attorney. They're really trying to bury you in technicalities, huh? The attorney remarked after reviewing the details of Sarah's case. That's putting it mildly, Sarah replied, her brow furrowed in frustration. These people are relentless. They'll stop at nothing to try and force me to comply with their ridiculous demands. The attorney nodded sympathetically. I can see why. Your previous victory over them must have really stung. Now they're looking to regain control and make an example out of you. Sarah sighed heavily. So what are my options here? I can't just roll over and let them steamroll me. The attorney leaned back in his chair, considering the situation. Well, the good news is that you have a strong legal case. The property records clearly show the fence is on your land, and the hedge height violations seem like a trumped-up charge. He paused, meeting Sarah's gaze. The bad news is, these HOA cases can get drawn out and messy. They have deep pockets and aren't afraid to fight dirty. You'll need to be prepared for a long, uphill battle. Sarah nodded grimly. I figured as much. But I'm not backing down, no matter what they throw at me. This is my home, and I'm not going to let them bully me out of it. The attorney smiled approvingly. I'd admire your tenacity, Mrs. Carson. In that case, here's what I'd recommend. Over the next few weeks, Sarah put the attorney's advice into action, filing a series of counter-complaints and motions against the HOA. She challenged the legality of their covenants, questioned the impartiality of the disciplinary committee, and even threatened to take the case to state court. The HOA, in turn, responded with an escalating barrage of fines, threats, and increasingly aggressive tactics. They dispatched teams of inspectors to comb through her property, citing her for the slightest perceived infractions. They're really pulling out all the stops, aren't they? Matt observed one evening, as Sarah pored over yet another stack of HOA correspondence. You have no idea, she replied, her eyes narrowed in concentration. These people are like rabid dogs. The more I fight back, the more they seem to double down. Matt placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. But you're not giving up, are you? Sarah looked up at him, her expression resolute. Not a chance in hell. I'm going to keep fighting them, no matter how dirty they play. This is my home, and I'm not going to let them chase me out of it. She paused, a glimmer of mischief in her eyes. In fact, I think it's time to take this battle to the next level. Matt eyed her warily. What are you planning? Sarah's lips curled into a determined smile. You'll see. But trust me, when I'm done, those HOA bullies are going to wish they'd never set their sights on me. With that, she turned her attention back to the stack of documents, her mind whirring with a plan that would put the HOA's tactics to shame. She was done playing defense. It was time to go on the offensive. Over the next few weeks, Sarah methodically put her plan into action, carefully orchestrating her counterattack against the relentless HOA. She knew that to beat them at their own game, she would need to fight fire with fire. First, she began reaching out to her fellow homeowners, using the evidence she had gathered to expose the HOA's underhanded tactics. She organized town hall meetings where residents could voice their grievances and share their own horror stories. It's time we stood up to these bullies, Sarah declared passionately at one of the gatherings. They think they can just push us around, but enough is enough. We need to band together and fight back. The response was overwhelming. Homeowners who had previously been too afraid to challenge the HOA found new courage in Sarah's unwavering resolve. Soon, a grassroots movement was taking shape, with residents actively campaigning to reform the association's governing structure. In the meantime, Sarah continued to wage her own legal battle, filing a barrage of motions and countersuits against the HOA. She challenged the validity of their covenants, questioned the impartiality of the disciplinary committee, and even accused them of violating state consumer protection laws. The HOA, in turn, responded with increasingly desperate measures. They ratcheted up the fines, threatened to place liens on her property, and even hinted at the possibility of criminal charges. But Sarah refused to be intimidated. "Bring it on," she would tell Mrs. Blackwell, her eyes blazing with defiance. "I'm not going anywhere." As the conflict dragged on, the local media began to take notice, drawn to the David and Goliath nature of the fight. Sarah's story quickly became a rallying cry for homeowners across the region, who saw in her struggle a reflection of their own battles against overbearing HOAs. Finally, after months of relentless legal battles and community mobilization, the tide began to turn. The HOA's heavy-handed tactics had alienated many of the homeowners, and the groundswell of public support for Sarah's cause was undeniable. In a last-ditch effort to regain control, the HOA board called an emergency meeting, where they were met with a rowdy crowd of residents demanding change. To their shock and dismay, a majority vote was held, and the entire board was unceremoniously ousted. As the new, more responsive board took over, one of their first orders of business was to drop all charges and fines against Sarah. Mrs. Blackwell, her once formidable power now shattered, could only watch in impotent fury as the community she had once ruled with an iron fist turned against her. In the aftermath, Sarah stood tall, a triumphant smile on her face. She had won, not just for herself, but for the entire neighborhood. The HOA's reign of terror was over, and a new era of community cooperation and respect was about to begin. "It was never their land to begin with," she said, her eyes shining with pride. "And now, they know it." As she and Matt celebrated their hard-fought victory, Sarah couldn't help but feel a sense of profound satisfaction. She had stood up to the bullies, and in the end, justice had prevailed. "This is just the beginning," she told her husband, her voice brimming with determination. "From now on, the homeowners are going to have a say in how this community is run. And no more HOA tyranny ever again." With that, she raised her glass, ready to embark on the next chapter of her fight for the true heart and soul of Sunnyside.